Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is a breakdown of Severance Season 2, Episode 8, Sweet Vitriol, a phrase that describes both the literal ether in this birthplace town of Lumon and the bitterness that Harmony Cobel feels toward the company and the family that brought her into that cult. It's a shorter episode this week, but one every bit as packed with meaning, visual clues, and revelatory details enlightening us on what's really going on with the series. So let's once again break down the episode scene by scene for everything that you might have missed. So again, the episode's title, Sweet Vitriol, is another name for diethyl ether, which was a compound used as an anesthetic before being replaced by safer options. Vitriol is an archaic term also for just sulfuric acid and other similar substances that by alchemists would be distilled from gravel in the Middle Ages. Obviously, we see in this episode how that title applies to the original brew of ether that Eagen formulated in this company birthplace town of Salt's Neck, and now just as a drug that the poor residents remaining in this town are now just clinging to as addicts, but also as a potential panacea cure-all that Eagen was trying to create. And yes, it also refers to the emotional state that these characters were really left in, particularly Harmony Cobel, as we find out the true innovator of the only actual successful medical breakthrough of this company, the Severance procedure, just to see the credit for that breakthrough taken away from her and credited instead to the company's CEO, and even her management of the most important application of that procedure, Mark Scout and Gemma Scout and the Cold Harbor file, management reassigned to her deputy out from under her. We open this episode on crashing waves on a rocky shore. Now, any B+ AP English student would tell you that anytime you see crashing waves, it's a Jungian archetypal symbol for the unconscious mind. I should know, I've said this in a number of Christopher Nolan analyses, and it kind of is, but this is really our first instance of an outdoor open ocean on this series, and it does remind us that nearly all of the file names in MDR and the corresponding rooms on Gemma's floor that her 24 to 25 innies go in and out of are all locations that border a body of water. And Gina Ippolito pointed out on the break room last week that Montauk in particular, in addition to its associations with the creepy Montauk monster conspiracy theory, also recalls the phrase "meet me in Montauk" from Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, particularly the icy beach where Joel and Clementine plan to meet each other once again after erasing each other from their memories. Obviously, we can see a parallel there with the star-crossed lovers of Mark and Gemma, and this opening shot does remind us of how Michel Gondry and Charlie Kaufman's film used crashing waves in those scenes as just a way of showing the unconscious mind reclaiming memories. For this episode, the production shot on Fogo Island off the northern coast of Newfoundland in Canada. The icy froth and chunky icebergs we see in this episode are all natural to this very, very cold coast along the northern Atlantic. And we should note that Newfoundland was the closest coast to where the Titanic sunk in 1912. Salt's Neck was 238 miles or kilometers or more from Kier PE, and we are reminded that this show always includes province as an option, like again the welcome script for severed employees and the paperwork at Butzerman Fertility Clinic. And by the way, some of you pointed out that Butzerman is the German term for the boogeyman, which is very creepy. And really, we've just wondered in the past if PE could be for Prince Edward Island, but that Canadian province doesn't always normally refer to itself as PE, and we saw in the Chinese restaurant how Mark used American currency on this series. We hear and see some seagulls, which could be why when Harmony was on the side of the road considering driving to Salt's Neck, we did hear some seagulls in the background of that moment. Harmony drives her Volkswagen White Rabbit along the coastal road, and even though this is an ocean coast, I'm reminded of the opening shots of The Shining as the Torrance family drove their tiny car through that mountain pass. The last time we saw Harmony Cobel back in episode 3 of the season, she was at first considering driving to Salt's Neck, but then turned around to confront Helena. But then after Helena tried to suggest an impromptu meeting with the board, Harmony saw the ominous security guy and got spooked like Karen and Goodfellas and then drove off. And remember, she had the breathing tube of her mother Charlotte Cobel with her, and now this episode explores that backstory as Harmony returns to that town of Salt's Neck. First, the town seems like just a simple coastal fishing village, but as we look closer, there are a number of dilapidated houses and then just completely broken down boathouses. This town looks completely abandoned, though we do see a church, so there is still God with these folks, though who knows if this is like a Christian church. We know according to Burt and Fields that at least Lutheranism exists in this world, but since this town was so important to Eagen and his wife, it could just be a church that's dedicated to them and that cult ideology. I also love in this shot how on one side of this land bridge that Harmony drives down, it's just water, but on the other side, it's icy chunks, which to me, I just can't help but see as a severed division of the mind, one that's open to the unconscious and one that's just kind of frozen in place. We fade to white on this shot, and we do not get the season 2 opening title sequence for this episode, maybe because this episode is just not not really concerned with Mark? I'm not really sure. Harmony brushes her teeth and sees an ether addict huffing the ether in a paper bag. As we'll see in this episode, the byproduct of Kier Egan's brew seems to only now be used by the remaining locals as just a way to get high. Devon's scout calls her on the phone, so we know this moment is aligning with the moment that Devon tried to call her back in episode 7 while she was arguing with Ragabi. This phone is tucked right beside her mother Charlotte's breathing tube. Harmony totally litters by tossing her plastic bottle in the snow. She clearly hates this town and what was taken from her here. We transition to the Drippy Pot Cafe. In Drippy Pot, in addition to talking about a pot of coffee, you also wonder if they might have named it after like a big old cauldron of ether that was just dripping. The server is Hampton, who's played by James LaGrosse. He deals his elderly patrons bottles of ether, making small talk about Dutch Stevens' kid flipping a snowplow on North Pine. Harmony enters.
Harmony Cobel. Well, flip my toboggan.
Yeah, it seems like she's mocking Hampton by just saying what she thinks he would be thinking in this moment. Harmony says that the town is older and frailer than she remembers, and she doesn't lower her voice. She's not at all worried about insulting Rose out loud. There just seems to be some real contempt here that she may feel these locals betrayed her or sold her out somehow. Hampton says,
Well, with the market readjustment from a few years ago and the fluctuating interest rates, there was a retrenchment from some of the core infrastructure investments.
The way he switches from small talk to Milchick-esque corporate speak without taking a breath or even without blinking if you look closely suggests that Hampton used to be a Lumen company man who was told this phrase over and over again as a justification for why Lumen divested from this town and let it die, which then would have led to Hampton's bitter life now, working in this cafe and having to deal ether to get by. But apparently seeing his old Lumen coworker has reawoken talking this way. The music transitions from the bluesy Who Knows to Charles Bradley's Where Do We Go From Here? Charles Bradley was a native to Gainesville, Florida, where many of us the new Rockstars went to college. Go Gators! A lot of questions in the song titles that just really evoke the sense of aimlessness the town of Salt Neck now feels. I like how Hampton drives what looks like a Jeep Comanche, which was a pickup truck variant of the Jeep Cherokee that was made by Jeep only from 1986 to 1992. So timeline-wise, if Hampton didn't or couldn't buy a new car since then, that would tell us how long ago Salt Neck was left behind by Lumen. He drives past this building with faded words painted on the planks. Kier Egan's Lumen Ether. There is a miracle cure for man. Maybe mankind, but we couldn't see any letters past M-A-N. And I assume this building might have been an old storefront or a bottling distillery, but the more recent factory is across the bay with a modern Lumen Industries globe logo. This factory has piers that make it a shipping harbor to the open waterways, suggesting that at one point Lumen shipped by sea a lot of their ethers directly from this factory. But yes, the phrase "there is a miracle cure for man" is yet another clue that Kier Egan's ether was an attempt at the alchemist concept of a panacea, a cure-all, a mythical tonic that could cure all ailments. Also in alchemy is the idea of the philosopher's stone that could be used to brew water for eternal life. So this tells us that from the beginning, Kier Egan was really trying to brew an ether to combat death itself. And that's why it really seems like to this day, the Lumen Company's true company objective is to use things like Severance to create a kind of artificial immortality. Harmony wants Hampton to drive him to Sissy's house. We'll meet her in a bit. And he says that she still lives by the 9, which is a reference to the 9 core principles of Lumen: vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, and wiles. Now, Hampton says that Sissy is a pariah in Salt's Neck, and while Harmony considers him and her to be former colleagues, Hampton categorizes it as child labor, and we later see really how messed up it was for them to be working at the plant together at just 8 years old. And Harmony says that this right here is where Kier Egan and his future wife Imogen met, right here at this ether mill, establishing this town, Salt's Neck, as the founding birthplace of Lumen Industries. That courtship painting from O&D of those two people supposedly depicted a vat of ether right here. And nothing against Newfoundland, but in what world would anyone consider this icy coast to be an ideal place for any industry other than like fishing or whaling, fur trading, or just any other geographical or climate appropriate trade? Kier supposedly founded this company in 1865, the year the American Civil War ended, but I just have to assume that this was a town he had grown up in before that, or maybe a place he was just banished to after everyone else ran him out of town. Hampton drives Harmony to the house covered in the back of his truck in case Lumen would be watching the house looking for her. Devon calls her a second time, suggesting that sometime after that initial call from Devon back in episode 7, Devon might have gotten worried and called her again. So at this house, Harmony finds Sissy, who I am assuming is Harmony's aunt, Charlotte's sister. Sissy, short for Celestine, is played by Jane Alexander, an actress with a long career on stage and screen, getting awards recognition for roles in The Great White Hope, All the President's Men, and Kramer vs. Kramer. Sissy wears a very odd white gown that kind of looks like a mix between a turtleneck nightgown and a culty religious garment of some kind. Harmony pushes past Aunt Sissy up to this room where she finds a weird plush toy that she finally remembers and height marks on the wall. Harmony at age 12 is the tallest of them, so she must have moved out or just stopped measuring at that point. I assume that the school for girls that she went to might have been a boarding school that she just lived at. Sissy says that she hates the huff peddler, Hampton, and Harmony fires back that Sissy is the one who gave him the thirst for ether, and we see an award plaque on the wall that gives some context. Lumen Ether Quarterly Striver, 4th Quarter, Year of Vision, Youth Apprentice Matron, Celestine Sissy Cobel. Okay, so Sissy must have worked as a matron to the youth workers at the plant, what Hampton now calls child labor, and some of those kids got total contact highs from the ether fumes and grew up into these poor addicts. Also, Year of Vision suggests that Lumen has some kind of internal calendar where the years are on a 9-year rotation, like the 12 years of the Chinese zodiac. Harmony finds the door to her mother's room locked and asks Sissy what she did with all of her stuff.
Sold to the poor.
Sold to the poor? Not donated to the poor? Is this not a kind of a Lucille Bluth thing to say, or maybe a Michael Scott thing to say?
And we are going to sell that to charity. That's what Christmas is all about.
Harmony asks if Sissy had been in contact with anyone from Lumen, and Sissy confirms that Mr. Drummond called. When Harmony demands the key to Charlotte's room, Sissy says,
That room stays shut until all who remember her sit with Kier. You know this.
Another weird Lumen cult custom here. Do not disturb the dwelling of a deceased person until everyone who knew that person in life has also passed away. That could be decades. So I guess it's kind of like preserving a tomb to keep familial grave robbers from snatching the crystalware. Sissy asks why Harmony brings nothing but woe into the house, and Harmony shoots back that it was Sissy who cursed the house with woe. Lines like this take on new meaning now that we know that the 4th testament of Kier and his ghost story about Dieter Eagen depicted woe as a ghostly crone. Harmony accuses Sissy of pulling out Charlotte's breathing tube, the breathing tube that Harmony keeps with her, that she had kept on her Eagen shrine, and Sissy slaps her and says,
If only she had been a believer, perhaps she would have found solace in the 9.
So this tells us that Harmony didn't inherit her adoration of Lumen from her mother, but rather from her aunt and the apprenticeship she would later have, and really just her own industrious talent as a girl. We are so hyped for James Gunn's reboot of the DCU that we are falling back in love with everything DC. That's why we're so excited that we got to be part of the pre-registration for DC Dark Legion. DC Dark Legion is a mobile and PC game officially licensed by DC, where you can recruit and upgrade over 200 iconic DC superheroes and epic supervillains to build a powerful team of champions and save Gotham City from the dark multiverse. This attention to detail in this game is wild. The character models are super accurate, and the voice actors for Batman, Joker, Harley Quinn, and others have already played these roles elsewhere. It feels like you've been transported into a DC sandbox, and it rules. DC Dark Legions is taking inspiration from the parallel universe of Scott Snyder's Metal series. Your job is to take on the role of a commander, assembling DC heroes to battle the Batman who laughs. And the teams you can assemble are astonishing, with over 200 DC characters recreated with stunning illustrations, detailed models, and flashy, authentic ultimate moves. This game was clearly crafted by people who love DC with DC's blessing. Plus, the game is a great mix of strategy, RPG construction, and even idle gameplay. You can effortlessly collect resources, train your favorite heroes, and customize your very own Batcave, all from your phone. DC Dark Legions officially comes out on March 14th, but by pre-registering now, you can get your choice of 1 mythical level hero, 1 weapon, 10 hero summoning draws, and a ton of development resources. To get started with pre-registration, just click the link in the description below. Sissy adds wood to the fire. This will be the same fire that she'll later try to burn the notebook in, so we get a setup of some scenic geography here. Harmony says that she didn't get to say goodbye to her mother, that she was busy with her studies, and Sissy seems to forget that, saying that Mr. Eagen saw something in Harmony.
And the Wintertide Fellowship. Even at the factory, no apprentice was more industrious than you.
So, the Wintertide Fellowship is the name of the company's intern and really junior executive training program that's awarded to especially bright youth. This is the same program that Miss Huang is now going through.
You cannot graduate from this fellowship until I have deemed you Wintertide material.
But also, I think they call it a Wintertide Fellowship as a contrast to it being what we know as like a summer internship. It's just interesting that the company of Lumen all tends to center around the season of winter. Now, in this scene, there is a table behind Sissy with a large old photo photo of a woman rather than Charlotte Cobel, I think this might actually be Sissy and Charlotte's mother or even their grandmother, because she kind of looks mid to late 19th century, like Mary Todd Lincoln-esque, I would say. This house looks like it's several generations old, especially if it still uses a wood fire furnace, and later if Hampton has to use a lantern. I'm guessing there's no like real electricity in this house, or maybe just Sissy just stopped paying for it. I mean, something had to run the breathing machine, I guess. Harmony asks where the key is, and she sees Sissy fondling this little figurine that seems to be showing Kier's face, crying a teardrop. I assume this is connected to the Lumon company logo of the droplet. Could the Lumon teardrop have come from the tears Kier cried for his brother Dieter? But she realizes this figurine must have come from childhood collection, so Harmony runs up to this room where we see her Kier Eagen / Lumon shrine, and whoa boy, a lot of psychotic props to break down here. First, perched on a shelf with lamps are 4 papier-mâché busts that represent the 4 tempers: woe, frolic, dread, and malice. These 4 tempers were depicted this way in the painting Kier Taming the 4 Tempers, and the 4 dancers in Dylan's Waffle Party wore masks and costumes based on these figures. We have not yet gotten actual confirmation, but frolic we assume is a jester. Woe must be either the bride or the crone. The depiction of Woe in episode 4 could really go either way since she was described as a girl, but I'm leaning more toward the crone because I think a bride is a better presentation of the concept of dread. Like in the old days, girls were often sold for dowries when marriages were economic arrangements, and a lot of brides do feel dread on their wedding days. For example, from Sondheim's Company. I'm not well, so I'm not getting married. You've been swell, but I'm not getting married. Clear the hall, because I'm not getting married. Thank you all, but I'm not getting married. And don't tell Paul, but I'm not getting married today. That is really the best historical depiction of dread that I have ever seen in my life. So that would mean that malice would be the ram. Rams and goats are different animals, but we should acknowledge that these are both horned animals that Lumon sees some kind of significance in. Hanging from a garment hanger with clothespins and along a sash at the top of the wall are like Girl Scout style breast pocket patches that I assume refer to the summer or winter youth retreats or camps that Harmony might have attended. Then there's also a black and white painting or a sketch of some cherubs riding a goat. There's a flyer or poster with the words work-life balance, which I assume could be an early ad for the Severance procedure. There's a Kier Chronicle clipping. Jame Eagen assumes role as Lumon CEO. According to the statues that we saw in season 1, Jame Eagen must have assumed the role in 2003. That's when his predecessor's term ended. There's another leaflet describing the open door with a stone path that seems to lead to the old Lumon factory in Salt's Neck. Maybe this would be a flyer to come work at this place. There's an old vintage photo of Kier Eagen in the center. Harmony had the same photo in her shrine in her apartment in Baird's Creek. There's a close-up of the shelf with some pull tabs of old school aluminum cans that were from the 60s and 70s. Maybe Harmony wasn't allowed soda. Some other props are truly cultish. There are candles and some pieces of animal vertebrae, and then the cards representing the 9 core principles arranged kind of like tarot cards with icons and descriptions on each card. Here are the ones we can make out. Vision with the eye, future made with eye incapable of seeing the other, that we may never know their brokenness. And at the bottom of that card, may my gaze be singularly placed upon the path made the words of virtue guide me in a daily labor of my great undertaking. Then verve with the lighthouse, and all I can really see there are the words may I proceed. And then we see nimbleness with an image of a man hurtling over a clothesline. The words are cut off, but it ends in you bend. And at the bottom of the card, may I ascend the broken state through the darkness of the undisciplined and not be led astray by those of will. Next, wiles represented by the shadow puppet. The blade of thought cuts like light. And the words are hard to make out, but it's like may my cunning something slice through the fog of something minds, guiding them to their great purpose in father something. Next, we see probity represented by a spoonful of medicine. We must be cut to heal. And at the bottom of the card, may my adherence to these highest virtues be like the persistence of falling water carving away the crude something. Aha, but an important phrase here. Harmony shortly after pulls another card with you must be cut to heal. And this is significant because back in season 1, Harmony had that sign that read, we must be cut to heal. And Milchick said this to Mark after he showed him the fake newspaper, the first episode of this season.
We must be cut to heal, mustn't we?
The next card over on the left is Benevolence, with 4 arms gripping each other in a square, kind of like the cubicle design of MDR. We see the words, you are my mouth, and through ye I will whisper on, may each hand reach something ignorant. And then we also see a card for Wit, and though we don't see them in frame, there would be 2 more cards for Cheer and Humility. Now, in the center of these cards is a can that contains other odds and ends that Harmony checks, but Harmony eventually finds the key in a small box, and on the shelf on the wall behind her there are 2 more large animal vertebrae. Harmony explores Charlotte's room, where we see an old-timey medical bed, some moth-eaten sweaters. And this photo of Harmony in a school uniform, this is actually her photo from the Myrtle Eagen School for Girls that was displayed on her Kier shrine back in season 1. She plugs in the breathing tube into her mother's machine and she sucks on the end of it in kind of a nursing gesture, perhaps trying to capture her mother's final breath or maybe just to give a goodbye kiss that she was unable to give her mother because she wasn't there for her death. Harmony's sobbing continues to play over an overhead shot of clumped ice chunks and the surf, and once again our opening shot of the crashing waves. So if we continue to interpret the frozen over half of the water on one side of the land bridge as the severed outie part of the mind that never really changes and has a fixed mindset, the crashing waves of the open water could reflect the innie, open to endless possibilities of the unconscious having a growth mindset. Harmony's grief echoing over both could be another representation of what Petey said in season 1.
You carry the hurt with you. You feel it down there too. You just don't know what it is.
How emotion transcends all parts of the mind, even past the severance barrier. He said, you carry the hurt with you. You feel it down there too. You just don't know what it is. The sunlight moves across the room rapidly as Harmony doesn't move, showing the passage of time and how she hasn't even changed her position. Now, the angle of the sun in the sky and the fact that it never really gets truly dark tells us how far north we are. The sun looks like this in Newfoundland in certain times of the year, but it also tells us that Salt's Neck in this fictional universe must be pretty far north. Hampton charges into the house and the closed captioning reveals some pretty hilarious insults between him and Sissy. He also tells her, go ahead, call everyone. We'll have a f***ing kegger. Hampton and Harmony do hits of ether, and it seems to have an emotional effect on Hampton. Like just doing this takes him back to when he was a kid and reminds him of this entire life that he wasted. Harmony says,
Oh, I haven't done that since I was 8.
You ready to man the vat for 10 hours?
oh my God, 8 years old? Being exposed to ether? Working 10-hour shifts? Man, this really was child labor and long hours too. Also, we have to assume that Hampton was doing an impression of Sissy there, and I loved it. So Harmony goes to the cellar and finds a yearbook for the Myrtle Eagen School for Girls. But of course, instead of just being called a yearbook, it just says Annual Reminiscences. The ME for Myrtle Eagen is the same logo that we saw on Harmony's old school uniform photo back in season 1. Myrtle Eagen was the third CEO of Lumon Industries, who ran the company from 1941 to 1959. Based on Patricia Arquette's age, Harmony would have attended the school sometime in the late 70s, maybe throughout the 80s. I just assumed that school would have been founded either during or after Myrtle's reign. We see a page for the field hockey team, and apparently the mascot of the school is Kids, and it says, "Go fighting kids!" But now, of course, a kid is also a name for a baby goat. So that's just another example of the company using goats for everything. But it's also, of course, an ironic reflection of the company using child labor and essentially breeding what I think is like a child army of fighting kids. There's also a win-loss record for this team, and we finally see the names of a lot of other towns that must exist in the real world of this region. We see Carterville, Northfield, Providence, Pine Coast, Kier, that's a town where the office is, then Bridgeport, Rock Isle, Gans, that's a town that Mark is from, where the college is located, Waterboro, Oyster Bay, and Frostport. We see that Harmony Cobel was a valedictorian of her year, and there's a photo of a younger Jame Eagen standing beside Harmony to award her the Wintertide Fellowship in the form of a life-size bust of Jame himself, which is crazy because assuming this was long before 2003, Jame was not yet CEO. He was still like third in line for the future CEO spot. Yet he was still established enough to award the fellowships and have massive busts made of his head. The description under the photo with Jame reads, during a special ceremony, Jame Eagen presented Harmony Cobel with the prestigious Wintertide Fellowship. Harmony Cobel's outstanding dedication to the 9 core values has earned her the distinguished honor of being selected as the Year of Wiles Wintertide Fellow. This achievement not only acknowledges Harmony's exceptional academic pursuits, but also recognizes her as the embodiment of the Eagen principles that form the foundation of the culture. Harmony went through her Wintertide Fellowship on the Year of Wiles. And while Harmony as an adult shows all the principles in different ways, and specifically exhibited probity based off of having that you must be cut to heal sign, the card for Wiles that we saw earlier depicted the shadow puppet icon and talks about how the blade of thought cuts like light. And it's suggesting that one of the core principles is just like knowledge, enlightenment, academic achievement. And I like that they use a shadow puppet for this. I think it's got to be a reference to Plato's allegory of the cave. You know, like the unenlightened prisoners in the cave only think that reality is just shadow puppets on the wall, and you must unchain them and let them see the light of reality. And that's what enlightenment and knowledge and education really is all about. But another way to interpret the shadow puppet with a true form and a shadow form could just be another way to show the two expressions of the self that Severance creates. And yeah, in the photo, this is a younger Jame Eagen. He is Helena's father and current CEO of Lumon. Harmony pops open the hollow base of the bus to find a stuffed spiral-bound notebook hidden inside. Smart hiding place, because Sissy probably wouldn't have thrown this away or sold to the poor. A sacred Eagen bust. Insulted by Sissy's suggestion that she owes fealty to the Eagens, Harmony opens her notebook to reveal that the full severance procedure was invented by Harmony Cobel.
Circuit blueprint, base code, overtime contingency, Glasgow block, all of it!
Whoa! So the fact that Harmony even spouts off overtime contingency and terms like Glasgow block being a term that we only heard starting in season 2, and all of this was written down in her school-time monogrammed notebook, proves that she truly did invent the procedure. I love this reveal. This explains why Harmony had the uncanny ability to sense just from Mark's vibe alone during Rickon's book reading party that the overtime contingency was in place and that his innie was now out. It explains why she had such a creepy stalker obsession with Mark and with Gemma, because she wanted to test firsthand how the most critical application of her invention was working out. It explains why she was so betrayed by Helena Eagen, removing her from managing the severed floor, because this was her pet project. And it also explains why she wanted to meet with Jame Eagen face to face, because she needed to be able to confront the CEO who stole credit for her work. Also, now I'm wondering if it was Harmony who named it the Glasgow block after the Glasgow Coma Scale, the neurological assessment tool to evaluate the level of consciousness after brain injury, maybe because her mother Charlotte could have been in a coma at some point, or maybe we're just to believe that Charlotte's breathing tube was necessary from a lifetime of inhaling ether fumes from living in that town. Now, there are various examples of the real world and in fiction of like a company boss and CEO taking credit for inventing the things that really came from a team of engineers and software developers. Like Thomas Edison took credit for inventing the inventions that were really built by a very talented team back at Menlo Park, and he just got the credit because he was the one who filed the patents. Elon Musk has been known for requiring his teams at his various companies to still credit him as a founder of every project and initiative so that he could get the personal credit. If you watch the Knives Out sequel Glass Onion, you'll know that that was based around a similar scenario of a billionaire having stolen the idea for a company algorithm from a blueprint written on a cocktail napkin. As we flip through the pages, we see this cross-section of what I assume are the early prototypes of the layers of the implant chip. And then as she continues to flip, at one point we see a chart at the top left of the notebook that says standard pre-severed brain waves, and these diagrams represent the 5 brain waves that Ragabi mentioned in the past episodes that we broke down in our video: delta, alpha, theta, beta, and gamma. Every structural component of Severance that we've learned about were all here in this notebook. We see charts labeled with these Greek letters and drawings of a human head and a skull to show where in the head the chip would be implanted and how the head would have to be tilted back to insert from the back of the head. And then we see this page with an enlarged drawing of the chip with its outer casing and cursive writing in a circle. Circuitry and chip sensors lie beneath the outer casing and wing pair, because we've seen these chips have to have wings that pop out to keep it lodged in place in the brain. Harmony says that she never told anyone this because she was told Kier's knowledge was for all, and if she ever sought credit, she would be banished. It sounds like she's saying this as something Aunt Sissy told her and then maybe forgot that she told her. And in what looks like the completed final design of the Severance chip, right in the middle of this chip, you can see what looks like a Lumon droplet shape. Like even in the middle of a chip that no one would ever see or look inside of, Harmony still designed this little company watermark to pay tribute to Lumon. Now, Sissy tries to burn this notebook, just like Miles does with the cocktail napkin and Glass Onion. It makes me so mad. But Harmony, thank God, is able to wrestle it away. Sissy says about Harmony's mother,
It was her hand that removed the tube, not mine.
and Sissy calls Charlotte a coward and that the mother and daughter are really weeds to the beautiful garden of Lumon. Even though Sissy seemed to believe that Harmony's original designs are legit, it just shows that for the truly indoctrinated in these cults, it's not innovation or creativity or original thought that matters, it's just loyalty and towing the company line. Hampton lets Harmony leave in his truck while facing whatever forces of Lumon are approaching.
Come tame these tempers of assholes.
Harmony finally picks up Devon's call and learns that Mark has been reintegrating.
Ragabi. Yeah. And she hasn't killed him yet.
Interesting that Harmony jumps right to the name Ragabi. She knows who Ragabi is, and that Ragabi is the only person in their world who would be able to perform the reintegration procedure, as sloppy as that might be. It just shows that Harmony has had her eye on Ragabi for some time. But then Mark gets on the phone.
Hello?
Tell me everything.
So So the closing credits we're hearing here is a song called Fire Woman by The Cult. And I love this arc for Harmony Cobel. She went from the show's villain in season 1 to an antagonist deposed from power, then someone lost in the wilderness, a white rabbit lost in Wonderland, to now an unlikely hero of this story, someone who we need to burn this company down. I think since she learned her mother decided to end her own suffering, doesn't really reframe her mother as a coward, but I think for Harmony seems to have inspired her to go on her own warpath, even if it's a kamikaze mission. And since the episode opened with icy water, I love that we end with raging fire. Comment down below with your thoughts on this episode. You can follow me at EA Voss, subscribe to all the channels in the New Rockstars network, and please check out our break room after show where we take all of your questions and have a longer discussion about all the theories and crazy things that are happening on the show. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.